Welcome to Nonprofit Stories, inspiring tales from Silicon Valley. We will explore the transformative work of nonprofit organizations and leaders who are changing our community by tackling some of the most pressing issues facing Silicon Valley. So without further ado, let's dive into this exciting conversation. Today, we welcome Allison Bakewell, the Executive Director at Cake for Kids of Silicon Valley. Their mission is to bake and deliver free birthday cakes to underserved children who might not otherwise receive one. Thank you to our sponsor, TradeMyHome.com, for their community commitment and for making this podcast possible. Silicon Valley faces severe challenges with underserved children, highlighted by its overwhelmed foster care system, where one child enters every 2 minutes. Homelessness is also a significant issue, with over 1,500 youths aged 18 to 24 homeless in San Jose, the highest in any major city. Additionally, about 60,000 children live in poverty in Santa Clara County. These statistics highlight the critical need for targeted support and interventions for these vulnerable children. Before we dive into the conversation, let's learn a little about the organization's great work so far.
It's a seemingly simple gift of a cake, but the cake really means so much more to the children. You know, often these children, they live with hand-me-downs, so having something of their own that's special and custom made for them really just brings in a tremendous amount of joy. And we believe that when a volunteer of ours goes to the effort, signing up for a cake, buying the ingredients, thinking about how they're going to craft that beautiful cake for this child that, by the way, they'll never see, that they bake a certain amount of love into that. I don't think you can really imagine some of these children's backgrounds. You know, we don't live in their shoes, but what we do see and what we do hear about is that cake will be remembered forever. They say that when children have very low self-esteem at an early age, that then kind of paints a bad picture for you in late life. So if we can help even a tiny bit with that by delivering a cake and making their special day really, really special, then our job is done.
Allison, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Sharad.
Give us a brief history of your organization. Who do you serve and how did it all begin?
Well, I'll start with how it all began. Our founder, Libby Grunder, was reading an article about a young foster girl in the Midwest, and she'd just been placed in a new home, and she came home from school on her birthday, and her foster mom had baked her a birthday cake. The young lady walked through the door, mom showed her the cake and said, "Happy birthday," and the young lady burst into tears and ran to her room. The foster mom was like, "Oh my God, is it the wrong flavor? I don't know why is she so upset?" She followed her into her room and said, "If you don't like chocolate, I'll bake you another cake. What can I do to make this better?" And the young girl said that she wasn't crying because she was sad. She was happy. She had never had a birthday cake before in her life. So Libby thought if that was happening in the Midwest, that it was probably also happening in her community, and she wanted to do something about it. So she rounded up her friends. She was quite the organizer. And she started partnering with a foster family agency in Silicon Valley. And in our first year, we delivered 13 cakes, and that was Libby and her friends baking and delivering to the foster youth. So over time, we've expanded our mission. We don't just serve foster youth anymore. We serve at-risk youth, and that includes kids in foster homes, in group homes, survivors of domestic violence or human trafficking, youth experiencing homelessness, so homeless shelters, unaccompanied youth who are living rough, which means they might not even be living in a shelter. They could be living in their car under a freeway, couch surfing from home to home. And these kids, they get services from human and social services organizations in the area, and we partner with them to get the requests for the kids that they serve. And then our bakers deliver to our partners, never to the youth. And we do that for the privacy and safety of the youth.
Sure.
Because as you can imagine, someone who's escaped domestic violence or human trafficking, they really do need their privacy for their safety. So we extend that to all of the youth that we serve. So over time, the population that we've served has grown. So we don't just serve foster youth. We serve low-income families. We serve youth experiencing homelessness, and that could be in a homeless shelter. That could be living rough. Maybe they're living in a tent, in a car, under an overpass. They're couch surfing at friends' homes. We also serve survivors of domestic violence and human trafficking, and we serve refugees. So our population has grown. Also at-risk youth, some of those could be runaway youth. Some of them could be youth looking for a safe spot after school, and there's several organizations in the area that provide that safe spot for LGBTQ+, or for kids trying to escape violence in their neighborhood, a safe place to be. And so we partner with agencies that serve all those populations.
And what is your personal passion behind serving the organization?
So a number of years ago, a friend of mine got me engaged with an organization that supported foster youth, the Silicon Valley Child Advocates. And it just really struck me how many foster youth there were in our area and how they were left behind and forgotten. And I retired from 20 plus years in the tech industry and was looking for things to do, and I stuffed a lot of envelopes at a lot of nonprofits. And one day I was reading the paper and it said Cake for Kids, and you can bake for foster youth. I'm like, well, how hard could it be to bake a cake? That sounds fantastic. And, my last name's Bakewell, so this is perfect. Well, I baked my first cake, and baking is not the hard part. Decorating is really hard. So even though my last name's Bakewell, this wasn't the perfect fit I thought it was going to be. And a couple of months after my first cake, they reached out and they said, we're looking for help in operations. I have a IT background, so I reached out saying that, I'd like to help them with IT. And I did that, as well as work in operations. We were completely volunteer run in the very beginning. So I volunteered for several years doing that. And then our director of operations retired, and so I took over that role. And then recently our executive director retired, so I took that role on. And every day I wake up thinking I have the best job in the world, because some child's going to smile today because of what our organization is doing.
So Allison, share a couple of stories with us where your organization has made a difference in someone's life.
I'd love to. There's so many. We don't get to meet the youth, but we do ask for feedback on every cake delivery, and we oftentimes get stories from the caseworker or from the family about what the cake meant to the youth. So this woman had been living in Silicon Valley for a long time and was struggling to afford rent, groceries. I mean, the cost in Silicon Valley has gone up so much. Yeah. And she was working 3 jobs trying to keep her family afloat. So her son's birthday was coming up, and he wasn't looking forward to it because he knew they didn't really have a lot of money and there wasn't going to be a big celebration. But she, one of the organizations that she was getting services from, partners with us, they reached out and asked if she wanted to get a cake for her son and asked, what would you like the theme to be on the cake? So she let them know that her son loved Frank Sinatra. His grandfather, who was his idol, always loved Frank Sinatra and introduced his grandson to it. And so this young man always thought that Frank Sinatra was, someone to look up to and an icon, and he just wanted to be like Frank. So one of our bakers baked a Frank Sinatra cake, and she's quite the artist, and she drew a picture of Frank Sinatra on the cake. And, the mom went to pick up the cake from the agency, and she said, I wasn't expecting much. Just a plain cake would be great, more than what we were expecting. And she was just blown away by this Frank Sinatra cake and this beautiful artwork on the cake. And the cake said, may you live to, the young man's name, and may you live to be 100 years old. Mm-hmm. And when she got it home and showed the young man, he burst into tears. He was so overwhelmed by the gesture that someone had made for him. And he said that his wish was that that person could get $1 million, because what they did for him was just beyond what he could think of a way to repay them.
Right.
So he was just overjoyed. And the mom said, thank you from the bottom of my heart. You made my son, who's a little bit different, feel like he was the king of the world. And really, that's what we're trying to do, is to make these kids feel special. Another really good example of making a difference in a young person's life, and maybe it doesn't sound like a big deal to some people, but
every small change is good.
Every small change. So this young lady, they have volunteers who advocate for the child that is in foster care. So this young lady is a teenager. She was nonverbal, and this advocate had been with her for several years and really didn't get a lot of interaction from the young lady. She requested cookies for her birthday. That's what the young lady wanted. So the cookies came, and the advocate brought them to her at home and, shared it with her. And the young lady took a bite of the cookie and smiled and then said, "Good." And the advocate said that was the first word she'd spoken to her in 3 years.
Wow.
So the power of someone doing something sweet for you turns around into a change in someone's viewpoint of other people, in their viewpoint of themselves, and how they start reacting to the world around them, which is really important for some of these kids who have been through, all sorts of trauma, hardship. And for them to hear that someone cared enough to take the time out of their day, it makes them look at themselves and their surroundings differently.
So share with us the entire process from when a child requests a cake to when the agency delivers that cake to the child.
Sure. So, and sometimes the kids don't request the cake. Sometimes it's a surprise for the kids. So each child their family is receiving services, or the child is working with a caseworker at a human or social services agency. And the caseworker might ask the child, what kind of cake do you want? So they get to choose the flavor, the theme. If there's any dietary restrictions, we can accommodate that. So we get all that information from them. Sometimes a caseworker just knows the child well enough and wants to surprise them on their birthday. And so the child might not even know they're going to get a cake. They also get to choose whether they want a cake, cupcakes, cookies, bars, or brownies.
So there's really a menu.
Yeah. So It's, really we want to do exactly what they want.
Sure.
So the caseworker puts in a request with us. We post it on a portal, and all of our volunteers have access to that portal, and they choose the request that works for their schedule. So they see everything in the region that they signed up to bake for. So let's say they just want to bake for Santa Clara County. That's all they see. But we deliver all up and down the Bay Area. So they could be, someone could say, I want to bake in San Mateo, Santa Clara, and San Francisco. So they see all the requests that are available, and they choose based on their schedule, what they like to bake, how far it is to deliver. Once they sign up for the particular request, then 7 days beforehand, we send them an email asking them to confirm that they're still on to bake. And that's really important to us because we never want to let down a child. So if we accept the request and we tell them they're getting a cake, we want to make sure that we get that cake. So the baker confirms with us, then they bake and they decorate in their own home, and then they deliver to the partner agency. And then once that cake arrives at the agency, a couple things can happen. If it's a homeless shelter, then they're probably going to enjoy that cake at the shelter, maybe after dinner with all the other shelter residents. If it's a social services agency where families come in and pick things up, then the family would come in and pick it up and bring it back home and enjoy it there. If it's an after-school program, they probably enjoy it with all their friends in the program. So there's a number of ways that the child can celebrate with that cake. And one of the things that we hear over and over again is, especially from foster youth, they get moved from home to home quite a bit. And when they move from one home to another, they don't have that many belongings. And then oftentimes they don't even have a suitcase to take it with. They're packing up a garbage bag and moving to the next home. Mm-hmm. So they don't feel like they have a lot that they can call their own. So when they get a cake that's theirs, and then they can share it with their foster family or they can share it with their friends, that's a huge deal to them, that they have something of their own that they can choose to share with other people. So that cake makes a huge difference to those kids, and they can choose, I'm going to share it with, the kids after school, or I'm going to share it at home with my foster family. I'm going to have a meeting with my bio family. I'm going to wait and share it with them. So lots of options for the kids, but in the end, they know that they got something just for them. And it's exactly what they wanted. They asked for, a minion cake, or they asked for cupcakes with butterflies on it, or, some of our top requests are Minecraft and not so much Call of Duty anymore, but lots of video games. Unicorns. Oh my gosh, unicorns all the time. Little girls love unicorns. Superheroes. Tons and tons of superhero requests. And then we get some really specific requests. We got one, a young lady wanted a girl on a painted horse, carrying a football, riding towards the end zone.
I see.
Very specific request. We had another one who said, I want a picture of a girl sitting on her bed in her bedroom, reading her cell phone. Just really interesting. And then we'll get, baker's choice. And then the bakers get to go and do whatever they want. And they come up with the most amazing designs. It's really incredible how much passion and creativity and love that the bakers put into the cakes.
Worried about the dilemma of selling first or buying first? TradeMyHome.com, powered by Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty, has the solution. With our guaranteed 24-hour cash offers, you won't risk owning 2 homes or being homeless. You can buy first and sell later. Are you upgrading or downgrading in the next 3 to 6 months? Text PAIR to 408-740-7400 for a free and no-obligation professional equity appraisal report. Exclusively for Nonprofit Stories podcast viewers. For more information, visit TradeMyHome.com or call 408-740-7400. Remember, at TradeMyHome.com, your home is sold guaranteed or we'll buy it. For the next episode of Nonprofit Stories, featuring Dr. Prima Rao, the founder and CEO of Aquila Health of Silicon Valley.
Well, Aquila Health is a 501c3 organization started in this Silicon Valley, and it serves the women who are underserved in our communities.
Their mission is to provide holistic health programs that empower underserved women to harness their inner resources and create change for a brighter future.
Connect the dots. Sure. Because it started off with a concept that I became aware of. It was a concept.
Check out our next full episode on Wednesday at 5 o'clock Pacific and 8 o'clock Eastern on YouTube and Apple Podcast.
Can you share the importance of celebrating birthdays for underserved children?
Absolutely. I think I mentioned these kids oftentimes have gone through unbelievable trauma. I mean, think about you getting taken away from your family and put into a foster home. Think about, not having a home to go home to. You're going to sleep in a car, or you're going to, sleep in a tent somewhere. Or think about being ripped from your homeland and coming to a brand new country. You don't speak the language. You don't, you don't know anyone in the area, and you have to make your way and, find all these resources to make your life better. The last thing that people are thinking about is a birthday cake. But being celebrated on your birthday, that's something that everyone takes for granted and loves. Like, everyone wants that acknowledgement on their birthday. And a lot of these kids are 18, 20, 24 years old, and no one's ever celebrated them on their birthday. So getting a birthday cake isn't just a sweet treat. It really is acknowledging that that person is seen and heard, and that people care about them. And for these kids that are going through all these things, a lot of times their self-esteem is very low.
Yeah.
And when someone takes the opportunity to do something for them, to show them that they're worth it, that goes a long ways to building their self-esteem and to giving them the tools that they need, that self-esteem, and to be successful in the future.
Right.
So you see a lot of kids who don't think they're worth it, and someone does something nice for them, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, maybe I am worth it.
Yeah.
I can invest in myself too, since I'm worth it. And it turns things around for them.
And share a couple of stories with us where volunteers have played a crucial role in the success of your organization.
Absolutely. Our volunteers really are the heart and soul of this organization. And they go through so much to make sure that that cake is as special as it can be. So one of our volunteers, she baked a really beautiful Moana cake for a young lady. And it had everything, right? It was the blue waves and the frosting and some graham crackers for the beach and shells. And, everything was just perfect. And she finished decorating it the night before the delivery, and then off to bed she went. The next morning she came into the kitchen to box up the cake and get it ready for delivery. And there was her 80-pound Labrador and a half-eaten cake.
Oh, okay, that's sweet. Okay.
So the dog enjoyed the cake, but now we have a cake that
We have a cake problem. Yeah.
a little bit of cake drama, right? She had to work that day, and the delivery was later in the afternoon. So she quickly whipped up a cake before work, went off to work, came back home, decorated the cake again, all the same Moana decorations, boxed it up, and delivered it actually on time.
Wow.
I mean, she really hustled her butt to make sure. She just couldn't imagine this young lady not having a cake on her birthday. And so she just went above and beyond to make sure that she got that cake to the young lady.
How sweet.
Yeah. And we have volunteers who, drive through snowstorms. We're across the country, and some places the weather's not so great. And 3 or 4 years ago, when we had all those fires in the Bay Area and people's power were out, we had so many cake cancellations. I'm sorry, I can't bake, my oven's out. And we just had so many volunteers. All we had to do was post something in our volunteer forum saying, people can't bake because their power's out. And we just had volunteers coming out of the woodwork. I've got power, I'll take care of it. They hadn't signed up to bake the cake. It was due on Monday. This is Sunday, and all the power's out. And we just had so many volunteers step up to make sure that those kids get a cake. And we have bakers who sign up to be emergency bakers. So they say, my schedule's flexible, and I can, call me at the last minute if you need a cake. So that happens, obviously with COVID, that happened a lot. People would, bake a cake and then find out someone in their home had COVID, and we're like, okay, keep that cake. That's not going to the child.
Yeah.
And we just put out a call to our bakers, and we would always get someone to step up and bake that cake. Our volunteers go above and beyond. There's no minimum or maximum amount you can participate. We have bakers who signed up 5-6 years ago and then didn't have the time to bake. COVID happened, things changed, they're working from home, and all of a sudden they have the time to bake. 5 years later, they start baking with us. And what we hear from them is that I had no idea how rewarding this was going to be.
Right.
I love to bake. I'd bake all the time. My family's sick to death of eating it. And this is the perfect thing, right? Now I get to bake a cake for a child who wouldn't have one. But I didn't know that when I dropped that cake off, how I would feel knowing that some child's going to smile and feel like someone knows they're important. So that's really why our volunteers are so engaged and why they really are the heart and soul of the organization.
Share a story around some of the unique challenges which your organization face, and how do you end up resolving them?
Sure. We keep saying sweet treat, and people think when they look at Cake for Kids, they go, oh, that is so cute. Wow. Just can't imagine people not having a cake. That's so nice. But it's really more than nice. It really is changing lives for kids. And we hear that over and over again. We hear it a couple of different ways. We hear it from caseworkers who say, I've been working with this kid for a long time. They don't trust adults. They don't believe that people are going to do what they say they're going to do. And when I say, what kind of cake do you want? And then I deliver this beautiful cake, it builds a bond and some trust between the caseworker and the youth. Mm-hmm. And that helps them be able to help the youth through whatever they're going through, whether it's trauma or it's, a difficult situation with family or, experiencing homelessness or whatever it is. That bond then between the caseworker and the youth becomes much stronger. So we're just a little side benefit to the caseworkers, but it's a huge benefit for them. But also, we're changing the perspective of the youth. And because we do ask for feedback on every cake, caseworkers often share the stories about the youth and how it's made a difference to them. And for us being able to tell those stories, that's how we're changing the narrative around. It's not just a sweet treat, it's more. And I have a really good example of, I have a quote for you from a caseworker who had a young man. He was living in a group home for foster care. And, he'd had a troubled past, and he was really trying to stay out of trouble. And he spent a lot of time at the house because it was a safe place, better than being out on the streets and getting into trouble. So the caseworker said, I'm excited to share that even though my client does not like to celebrate his birthday due to past trauma, the party was a success. Having a birthday cake and a celebration, we were able to change the narrative and facilitate a party with your help. Although we can't change the past, we can change the future. And
so sweet.
Yeah, that's what's important here, right? Is that we're never going to change the past for these kids. But if we can just make that one small change and that changes how their outlook for the future, then we've really come a long ways towards helping them have a very bright and successful future. So there's another one. I don't know. I love to hear the quotes from the kids.
These are all great. Yeah.
There's another young man. He's under 10, and he's a very quiet young man. And the caseworker said that never really showed excitement. But they asked for a minion cake, and that's his favorite. So he started dancing around the room, doing a happy dance. And he's like, oh my gosh, a minion cake. I can't believe it. I'm just happy that people actually care about me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So all of a sudden he realizes that someone cares. He didn't think that before the cake. So this really drives the point that it's more than the sweet treat.
What one advice will you give to the volunteers who want to bake a cake for your organization?
You don't need to be a professional baker.
Okay.
I'm not a professional baker. In fact, my very first cake, I was so stressed out, and I even forgot that I was supposed to bake it and deliver it. And so I baked the cake that night as soon as I remembered, and the next morning I had to rush out and find decorations. And, put the cake together and get it to the agency. I was even a half an hour late getting it to the agency. And I was just like, oh my God, I never want to do this again. This was so stressful. And then I just started thinking about what that child thought about getting that cake. And I thought, my stress is about baking the perfect cake.
Right.
I don't need to worry about that. I need to make sure that I put a lot of heart and soul and love into that cake.
Mm-hmm.
So our bakers don't need to be professional bakers. We just ask that you have a good amount of decorating skill. I didn't have it. I certainly learned over time. And you can choose what you want to bake. So I don't bake cakes anymore. I'm not very good at decorating cakes. I do cupcakes, cookies, bars, and brownies.
Yeah.
I'm much better at decorating those. So, if you think that this is something you want to do and you think, I just am not a good cake decorator, don't worry. I don't do them either. And I still get the amount of satisfaction I get from baking. I just delivered 4 dozen cupcakes on Monday, and it felt so good to know that these kids, it was a group birthday party, and that they were all going to have a really great celebration of the birthdays for that month. It just made it worth squeezing in that extra time to bake the cupcakes during the day. And, I got up and really early to make sure the frosting was all done and sprinkles were on it.
Right.
It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to look professional. A lot of the cakes, if people go to our website and they see, or they check us out on Instagram or on Facebook and they see these gorgeous cakes, don't worry, not all of them are like that, especially mine. You don't have to have a beautiful cake, but you do have to have a lot of heart and soul.
It's the passion you put into the baking.
It is the passion you put into the baking. You have to want to make that kid feel extra special, and then your treats, whatever you bake, they're going to come out fantastic.
Allison, thank you so much for your time today and share all these wonderful stories with us. Keep up the good work and let's stay in touch.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to the podcast and acknowledging the impactful work of nonprofits in Silicon Valley. Please subscribe and share this episode with a friend. Thank you to our sponsor, TradeMyHome.com, for their community commitment and for making this podcast possible. Until next time, remember to support local nonprofits.